What I'm saying is, you can't buy a win, Lee. But maybe you could buy the guy who'd get you a shot.
Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? How's your podcast coming along? Do you even have a podcast? Well, maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast and you're like, I don't even know how to start a podcast or what should I even talk about. What's probably the first thing you want to figure out is what are you going to talk about with your podcast? But I am Chris from the Chris and Christine Show podcast, and because people seem to like that show and they're asking me questions on how to make a podcast happen, or at least how to make it sound great, so then I just created Podtastic Audio to help out people make a podcast. Basically, it's like the behind the scenes to the Chris and Christine Show. Things that have worked and things that haven't worked, and I share it all right here. So, the best thing you can do is to learn from your mistakes, but the better thing to do is to learn from somebody else's mistakes. So let me make the mistakes that you were going to make. I'll make them for you, and then you can put it into practice, what worked and what didn't work, into your show so that you can also have an amazing sounding podcast. So as you heard with the intro to the intro of the show, it is from my favorite movie, Ford versus Ferrari. And in that scene, the Ford executive that's got Ford is this massive, massive company. Well, they still are, but they wanted to get into the racing scene to win at Le Mans, which was mostly dominated by Ferrari. They've always won every single year. And due to a bad deal that went south, where Ford wanted to buy Ferrari just so they can get into the racing division, they wanted to be into racing and they wanted to win at Le Mans. And they knew that Ferrari was winning every single year, and yet they needed to get bailed out of bankruptcy. I think they were going into bankruptcy, something or other, and they were up for sale. So Ford's like, why not just buy Ferrari? Then we instantly have all the cars we need, all the drivers we need, and it's already a winning team. Therefore, we can get into racing, and ta-da, here we are. Now, in that scene, Ford, the executive from Ford, was talking to Carroll Shelby about, because he was the only American to win Le Mans at that point. So he came to him and saying, hey, you know what? If we threw you a bunch of money, like unlimited amount of money, we should be able to win Le Mans. There's no problem winning. But what Shelby says is very true. He says, you can't buy a win, but you can buy the guy that can give you a shot. Now, when it comes to podcasting and people saying, oh, if you give us a bunch of money, we'll make sure your show is number one in Apple. We'll make sure that your show is highly rated on the charts. You pay us and you will get 1 million reviews and ratings for your show. Your show will climb the charts. Now, how is it even possible to pay somebody to promise you a win? You can't buy a win. That's basically what I'm saying, is you can't buy your way to the top. Your show has to be good. You have to keep the listeners listening. The ones that come in at the beginning have to stay till the end. You have to keep listeners subscribed. You have to be engaged. There's so many elements when it comes to a podcast. And I know that there's a podcast about everything, and there's a million different ways to create a podcast. There are podcasts that start off slow, start off strong. There are story podcasts. There are documentary style podcasts, which I like to call them, where you may have an interview, but you just slice and dice it up to where you say, hey, we were interviewing so-and-so talking about this subject, and this is what they had to say. And it's done very much like any documentary that you've ever seen, which takes a lot of editing to do things that way, but it may keep the audience more engaged than listening to somebody just drown out for like a 5 to 10 minute rant about something that kind of gets that monotone stage when you're listening to a podcast. Keeping it fresh and chopping things up and adding a little production flavor here and there may keep the listener listening longer. So just this morning, I get a message asking for some advice on how to use promotion, or how to properly promote I'm assuming their podcast. They weren't too specific about that, but it was from a podcaster. So I just can only assume they meant their podcast. So they want to use some money to figure out how to use either Facebook ads or Instagram promotions or even Twitter promotions, all of these social medias. They offer some kind of promotion within their actual platform. Now, I have tried this a few times with this show and the Chris and Christine show, only on Twitter for like a day or two. I think I paid somewhere in the ballpark of $20 or so, I think, for each time I did it. And I ran a promotion. It can even ask you like where do you want this promotion to go? Are you looking for more people to click your link? Are you looking for more people to subscribe? What are you looking to get out of this? And that's exactly what I told him too. It's like, why are you promoting? What are you looking to get out of this? Think of the end in mind. Are you looking for people to subscribe to your show? Are you just looking for people to press play and listen to your show, hoping that by just pressing play, they will stick around and want to listen to the next episode or subscribe to your show? Eventually, what we really want to get is subscribers. You want long-term people to stick around, press play, and not go anywhere for a while. But it does happen. Like just this morning, I was looking at my phone under my Apple Podcast app, which I have Apple Podcasts, and I'm realizing like this show, I just subscribed to it. I just subscribed to a new show probably about a month ago. It's a major celebrity. Like I love the movies they're in. It's an interview style show. I'm not going to say who it is, but he does an interview style show, and I'm listening to the podcast, and some of the people he brings on, you obviously can tell that the show, because it's on YouTube and it's a podcast form, but it's obviously filmed and done the way of a normal like sit down interview, like a late night show or any of those kind of talk shows where you got two people sitting on a couch or a couple chairs, microphones are there, cameras are filming them, everything's on them. So there's no need to really introduce anybody because you can kind of see who it is and the description might be right there. And even on the YouTube version, they may actually put out a graphic or some text running across the screen over each person coming on the show. Like here's so-and-so, and it has the text of them right beneath their image on the screen. But on the audio version, they don't mention any of that stuff. So I'm like, who is this person they're talking to and why should I care? That's another thing too, is if you're doing an interview show and you're bringing somebody on the show, before you have them on the actual show, probably mention who they are, at least what they do. And if they are a celebrity, like a movie star of some sort, I would suggest probably mentioning shows that they've been in or movies that they've been in. Because I'm listening to their podcast and he's talking about different shows or different episodes of shows or characters within a show. I maybe never seen the show. You're mentioning a character's name. Oh, when you played so-and-so. And I'm like, on what show is he talking about? What movie are you talking about? So that's why I'm starting to like, you know what? I'm done with this podcast. I'm just going to remove it from my player. So I did that, got rid of that podcast. And I did the same thing with another show today too that I absolutely love. I listen to every single week. It was a show about a particular TV show that I used to watch all the time, but the show's over, the season's over. So now the podcast has evolved into talking about other shows that I don't really watch. So I'm not like, well, I'm just going to end that show. And that's the same thing happens with your podcast too. Sometimes people will listen to it for the time being, whatever it may be, but they fall off. For whatever reason, it might not be something that they're interested in. If you're talking about a particular niche or a topic, and maybe they're like, well, I'm not really into that anymore. Like my kids, for example, they might be into football one week or soccer another week or baseball another week. And maybe during that one little time, they're super into whatever they're into. And then they gravitate towards something else and they're into that other thing. So don't feel bad if your listenership goes up and down. People will stay around and maybe they'll leave because it's just not for them anymore. And don't worry about it, But going back to what the guy was asking me this morning about how to promote, I just basically said that you can try the ads and things of that sort. And I would try it on a micro scale to see if paying for promotion makes any kind of difference at all in your stats. If you saw zero difference in your stats after running a promotion, even like one extra listener, then maybe nothing happened. And when I'm talking about your stats, what you really should pay attention to is not the total numbers. not the monthly numbers. You really should pay attention to the weekly 7-day numbers. And the reason why is because those 7-day numbers, basically what each episode does, not the total show, I'm talking about what each episode does in 7 days. That will give you a very close, pretty close, almost accurate number on what the size of your audience really is the 7-day play count for each episode by itself. And in fact, if you're going to try to run any kind of advertisements for your podcast, nobody cares if you got 1 million downloads. Nobody cares because you might be running 10 episodes a week, which actually might make your total number a lot bigger than it really is. If you're doing a daily show, I know some shows will do daily episodes or they'll do 3 podcast episodes a week. But if you only have 10 listeners to each episode total, you automatically got 30 downloads for the week across 3 different episodes. So you look at it like that, it's actually an inflated number. It's not accurate. We really want to know is how much does each individual episode produce in, say, a weekly or even a monthly time, but just for that solo episode. Follow those numbers. And those are the numbers I've really been paying attention to. I know the grand, total number sounds amazing when you look at it, like, wow, we had that many people listen. Not really. The same thing goes for your monthlies. When you see that, you're like, wow, that number looks great. But to be more accurate, you really want to know is how much did each episode do on its own? Okay, so now we're going to have a little fun. I was on my good old friends, the robot Skynet machine, ChatGPT, and I asked it a few questions about writing podcast scripts. Now, you know that I never, ever write a script for this podcast, probably because I'm a horrible writer and I can't figure out how to do that. I just ramble into the microphone, which seems to work out pretty well for me. That's how I podcast. That's how I roll. But today I decided to throw things into the ChatGPT machine as a podcast and see what it came out. So I thought the idea of speaking of growing your podcast and promoting your podcast, I said, write me a podcast script on why some podcasts fail to gain growth. Because that's the thing, we always want to grow our show. So what makes us stop growing our podcast? And here is what ChatGPT decided to give me as a podcast. Here's what they said. It says, hello and welcome to the podcast, quote unquote, Behind the Mic, where we explore the ins and outs of podcasting and what makes it successful. In this episode, we'll discuss one of the biggest challenges podcasters face, gaining growth and building a loyal audience. Despite the growing popularity of podcasting, many shows still struggle to gain traction and build their listenership. So what are some of the reasons why podcasts fail to grow? We all want to know that, right? Okay, here we go. That's what it says. One of the most common reasons is poor production quality. Poor audio quality, inconsistent sound levels, and inadequate editing can all turn off listeners and make it difficult to grow your following. And the same can be said for poor content. If your show lacks interesting topics, engaging guests, or a clear value proposition, it can be difficult to keep listeners engaged and attract new fans. Another factor can impact growth is poor marketing and promotion. What? Check that out, huh? If you're not actively promoting your show and reaching out to potential listeners, it can be difficult to build an audience. Well, yeah, if you don't tell anybody you have a podcast, how do they ever know you're going to have a podcast? That's basically what they're saying here. This is especially true for new podcasts that are trying to establish themselves in a crowded and competitive market. Yeah, you're going head to head with Joe Rogan. Good luck. Let's see what else they have to say here. It says, a lack of consistency is also big issues for many podcasts. If you're not releasing new episodes regularly, or if there are long gaps between shows, it can be difficult to build a dedicated following. Listeners want to know that they can count on you to deliver new content on a regular basis. So it's important to establish a schedule and stick to it. Now, I am horrible with schedules. I am trying as best as I can to keep a schedule going for the Chris and Christine show. When you have two people and different co-hosts with different schedules, and you got maybe guests coming in, the guest stuff and our stuff, and then having time to schedule with both our busy lives, it's a nightmare. We try to get it out as soon as we can. The same thing with this show. I try to get it out as soon as I can. Okay, and then they say, finally, many podcasts fail to grow because they don't engage with their audience. Whether it's through social media, email, or other channels, it's important to build relationships with your listeners and to listen to their feedback. So if a listener tells you, hey, the show is no good, or I don't like this segment, or I don't know why you had that guest on, I couldn't stand them, listen to them. Maybe take their advice. This not only helps you to improve your show, but it also helps to build a loyal and engaging audience. If the audience feedback actually comes in and you actually respect it and do a few minor tweaks based on the audience feedback, they may actually appreciate that. You're doing the show for them, not for you. It's really their show. I mean, it's your show, but it's their show. You know what I'm saying? Okay, and that's in conclusion. Building a successful podcast takes hard work and dedication. But by focusing on production quality, marketing, and consistency, the audience engagement can build a loyal following and achieve growth over time. Then it says, thanks for tuning in, blah, blah, blah. We are the such and such show. Give us a 5-star review. What? No, I didn't say that. But basically, tune in each week for my podcast, blah, blah, blah. There you go. So thank you to ChatGPT. I do really appreciate you writing this little script for our podcast. It actually sounded fairly well. I was really well impressed by what they had to say. Now, speaking of podcasting, I'm going to tell you a little short story what happened to me the other morning when I was going to school with my kids. So I'm taking my kids to school, and I have a truck that has Apple CarPlay built into it. So the very first thing I do when I get in my truck is I plug my phone in to the system. So because Apple CarPlay, if you're not familiar with what it does, is it lets you take your phone and you plug it in, and on the little screen there, it's got all your messages, your phone calls, it's got your apps that play music, apps that play podcasts, all right there. And since I was listening to a podcast in my truck, I plug it in. The very first thing that pops on is my Apple Podcast app. And the very first thing that starts playing is a podcast, starts playing on the speakers. And we're backing out of the driveway, and we're coming around to turn around to take the kids to school. And my youngest son, who is 10, he says, Dad, why are you so much into podcasts? Like, why do you always listen to podcasts? And it got me thinking, like, why do I listen to podcasts? Like, why am I into podcasting? And then I had to look back and think back in time when there was a time that I didn't know what a podcast even was or what that stuff was even about. See, I used to listen to a lot of morning radio, like a lot, because I was working mornings for a long time, and I would absolutely love morning radio shows. In fact, they are your friend. When you're driving and you're at work and that's all you have is the radio and you get involved, it's something to look forward to every day. Every morning, I would constantly listen to the radio. I had my favorite station, my favorite shows. I will never, ever miss an episode because I worked Monday through Friday. The morning shows were on Monday through Friday. So I would listen nonstop, end to end, every single day. And then, for whatever reason, with careers and changing jobs and things of that sort, I started working in the evenings. I started working nights. So I was like, man, I know there's a couple of good night shows I would tune into, I like to listen to. So I had that going for me. But my regular morning show that I used to listen to all the time, well, it was gone because I couldn't have a chance to listen to it at all. Well, I'm like, that kind of sucks. I can't listen to my favorite radio shows. And then I discovered podcasts. And then I discovered that some of my favorite morning show radio stations were doing a podcast version of their morning show. So now I can listen to my morning show that I used to love at 7:00 every morning. Now I can listen to it anytime I want. And that's how I kind of got into podcasting, because it was all about listening or re-listening to the morning show that I would miss at night. I mean, during the day, now I can listen to it at night. And that's how I got started with podcasting. And that's how it evolved for me. So I look at it as it was the morning show, but on demand anytime I wanted at night. And also for weekends too, because I was also starting to work weekends and nights. And there's nothing on a Sunday night on local radio. I mean, it's like the worst time for radio. It's like they put the weird shows on at Sunday evenings here, at least here in America, at least here in San Diego. I notice there's like absolutely nothing on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening on the radio that's any good. I mean, they put the weird niche shows out there, which is fine. I mean, get some experience, something new. But thank God for podcasting, because it allowed me to listen to my favorite morning shows. Not only just one morning show, I could listen to multiple morning shows. There was a morning show in Los Angeles that I listened to all the time, plus one in San Diego. I listened to both of them. And there was another other podcast I listened to also. So that's kind of how I got started in podcasts. That's what I told him. It's all about on-demand content, because he likes to watch YouTube. I said, what if your favorite YouTuber that you love to watch every single day, however you watch your YouTube, I said, what if your favorite guy or favorite channel was only on at 7 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday? Would you wake up early to watch your favorite channel? He said, yeah, probably I would. But then I said, isn't it so great how you don't have to do that? You can watch your favorite YouTube show anytime you want. That's basically what got me into podcasting, was the fact that I could listen to my favorite shows anytime I wanted. So that'll about wrap it up for today. I want to say thank you so much once again for being here. Everything you want to know about this show, Podtastic Audio, you can find at podtasticaudio.com. And if you love podcasting and you want to get your own podcast out there because you have something to say, we all got something to say, but you're not too sure on how to actually record and edit and produce and all that stuff, don't worry, I got you covered. Go to podtasticaudio.com/easy. And I will be your easy button. You schedule a meeting with me. We figure out a plan for your show. I'll create the artwork for your show. I will record your show for you, so you don't have to actually, did I hit record button? Or what platform do I record in? Or how do I do that stuff? Don't you worry about any of that stuff. I'll take care of you. I'll hold your hand the entire way, and I'll take care of you. So that's what I do over here at Podtastic Audio. I love audio. I love radio. I've been an audio junkie my entire life. I've listened to more audio than I've ever have consumed any kind of video. So for audio, for me, is always king. That's just me. That's my perspective. That's the world that I grew up in, was the radio, was always my friend. So until next time, you keep on making your fantastic podcast with your amazing audio, and I'll catch you next time.